Welcome to Answers Unleashed, a talk show to help you reshape your brain with science and faith to find the answers in front of you. Now, I am so thankful that you're tuning in today again on this Wednesday. I am so happy you're here because, as you know, we talk about science, we talk about faith, we talk about psychology, we talk about ways in which you can actually reshape your brain in various different ways to find the answer that is in front of you. Now, as you know, I'm a scientist. I love science. And anytime there is anything exciting breaking in the science world, you know I'm all on it. If you see my Facebook page, if you look at the TED Talk that I did, you know that I love science and I love bringing on who I call the newest Einsteins. These are individuals who are creating groundbreaking technology and science applications that are helping people across the world. Now today, our topic is our immune system, your health, but specifically how new and early cancer detection computers, you heard me right, computers are empowering doctors in saving lives. All right. Now, a lot of us have been in a situation in which we have had a family member or a close friend or relative suffer from an immune deficiency, or in the worst case scenario, cancer. An early detection of cancer increases the survival rates of patients, and that's just a fact. But how early can cancer be detected? That's what the question is today, and that's what we're actually going to discuss. And with Western medicine, it typically asserts that cancer can be detected in, I think it's around 3 to 5 centimeters in size. It was the early detection. But that's with imaging technologies. And did you know that every single person has cancer cells in their body and their immune system is what works to remove this before it grows? However, those individuals with compromised immune systems may have cancer cells in their systems and do not know it. And this terrible cell and these collections of cells with the wrong movement or the wrong internal environment can spread before it is actually detectable. Is there a way to stop this? So one computer-based pre-cancer detection system is changing the way doctors identify and treat cancer and increase the overall immune system of patients. So people actually have a fighting chance for a life that they've always desired. So today, we are here and we're going to find out a little bit more about Andre DeFusco, who is the CEO of Synvenio, and how he describes how computers are actually using cells and its DNA to give individuals a fighting chance of life. Thank you, Andre, for being here with us.
Thank you, Olympia. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Now, I love your background. You have a very impressive background. And in the audience, let me share this with you so you have a little bit more of a description of who I'm sitting next to. Now, Andre DeFusco, he is a 20-year technology entrepreneur with hands-on experience leading early-stage companies in various high technology application areas. And this is so fascinating. His current interest is in developing the technology for personalized medicine and molecular diagnostics as the chief executive officer of Synvenio. But he's also worked in many different areas of technology. He was previously president and CEO of Sabius, who was a provider in fiber optic systems for the industry. He also was the director and president of Nevin. Did I say that right? Nevin. And that was a facial biometrics company that was later acquired by Google. So we are here today finding out about cutting edge technology. And Andre, to just say hi to our audience a little bit.
Hello, Olympia.
Hey, do you know what? I love what you're doing. And I had the opportunity to meet you at a polo match, and that was so fun. And I was fascinated by what your company is doing. And just if you can give us a little bit of a background about what your company does and how it's it's developing, how it originally started with its computers, and how it actually morphed into a new innovative way of medical diagnostics.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll step back and I'll say that I'm not a doctor, a medical doctor, and I'm a product of sort of British education system. I went to boarding school when I was 14. Then I came to UCLA as an undergrad. But in boarding school, I had a classical education, or as things were once in England. But in, at the age of 16, our English professor installed some computers, and I learned how to program. So when I came to UCLA, I got a job right away, and I programmed, at night. I went to school during the day. And I'm saying that because that's really been the guiding or the constant in pretty much everything I've done, professionally and otherwise. So at the root of all this is usually software. It's usually some sort of computer that is doing measurements or very quick deductions about, sensors or information that come, from outside. And it's really the same thing whether you're looking at a sequence of a genome, which is a ton of data, or whether you're looking at a sensor. If you're trying to discern a threat at the end of a fiber optic cable that's maybe being towed by a submarine, or a well that maybe has some issues, and you have a fiber optic sensor down there, and you're trying to figure out if the vibrations means there's going to be a failure. At the end of the day, all of this is processed by computers. So at Synvenio, this is the first for me in the life sciences. It's been about 9 years now.
9 years.
It's a long time for an entrepreneur in a company, but we didn't do this just to flip it. It's something that we built over this time. We worked with some great professors at the University of California in Santa Barbara. They had some sensor technology for what they call rare cells in complex backgrounds, and we built a machine to make all this work automatically. Then we took this machine to some people at the stem cell environment, and that led us to cancer, and we've been there ever since.
So the machines, tell us a little bit more about the machines that were originally built and how you came about finding that that same process of that computer technology was the same way that the technology can be read in human cells.
Yeah, so that's a product really of all the work done in the human genome 15 years ago. So it became clear about 5 or 6 years ago that cancer cells have certain characteristics, and if you could just isolate those cells from all the other cells in our body, which are billions and billions. I mean, one tube of blood has about 1 billion cells in it. But if you could get the 5 or 6 or 7 bad agents out of that complex background, then you could access their DNA. You could look at their nucleic acids, you could sequence the DNA, and the sequencing that we adopted is a semiconductor-based sequencing. I can tell you about that if you want, but that was the path that led us. So we built a machine to find the cells, and then we built a lot of software around the sequencers that are produced by other companies to actually interpret the variations of the DNA of those cells, the bad actors.
And I find that so amazing. There's actually an acronym called TRIZ. It's a Russian acronym, which studies the theory of innovation. And and this study of innovation has been around for over 20 years. And it looks at how different technologies are built. And one of the key things in which they always say is that individuals that have found solutions in one area are the same innovators who apply those solutions in a completely other area that actually works. And so you saw this DNA sequencing with these computers, and tell us more about what you developed after that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think innovation is something that has a common thread. It's a way of thinking. You have to have a certain flexibility in how you solve problems. Unfortunately, it's often incompatible with venture capital, with the idea of starting a company and then giving a quick payback even to shareholders. I know that sounds anathema, but sometimes it's not possible to do that. In biology and certain sciences, it takes a long time to work these things out. So you need a team. It's not just me. You need a team of people that are willing to admit when something doesn't work, not persevere. But most of all, you have to sort of bend space a little bit, to borrow from Dune. You have to, but to innovate, you just have to have a broad view of the issue, and then you can apply it to different industries. Industries are just sort of economic constructs around that we do to we use to make companies and sell things for a profit.
And your industry is humanitarian based. And that's the reason why I specifically wanted your company and you representing your team on this show. And I find what you're doing now with what you've discovered from using these sequencing to actually help people in early detection.
Yeah, it didn't start that way. We thought we would first make all these machines and provide the researchers with the means to find the next cure, the next biomarker, the next whatever. We all know that many cancers cannot be detected early, and all the doctors will say if they could only find it when it was 1 or 2 cells, they'd be able to take care of it before it becomes a large mass that's difficult to treat or metastasizes, spreads throughout the body. So we thought we'd make all the machines and sell them to the hospitals and research centers. And then we noticed that the technology, as so often happens, is way ahead of practice, way ahead, 20, 30 years ahead of practice. So we set up a lab, and we hired a crew of great technicians, and we started processing samples for doctors. So we would typically talk to doctors that were pulling their hair out, very difficult cases. These are patients that were not doing well on any of the accepted regimens. There's a national standard of care that the doctors follow very closely. So all these very difficult cases we started to process, and we had some turnarounds. We were able to give doctors the evidence they needed to treat them with experimental drugs, and people did well. I wouldn't say everybody recovered and started playing tennis in a day, but there were clearly the signs that evidence-based treatment was the way to go, and so the sort of marketing terms are personalized medicine, and things like this. And that was the turning point for us, because the minute you help a patient or 2 patients, you say, okay, we have to make this work. So our lab became larger. Now we're in a phase where we deal mostly with medical issues. We have, of course, supplied the technology far and wide to anybody who wants to use it. So it's not just a proprietary thing that we do in our lab. And we spend most of our time with doctors and their patients, but we typically deal with doctors, not a direct-to-consumer. And we are also going to launch, a lung cancer test for early detection of lung cancer, which is something that's not currently possible. And that's very important because in lung cancer, if you detect it early, you live. If you detect it in stage 3 or 4, you tend not to live more than, a year, 18 months. And that was the story of my mother, for example, 15 years ago,
And I think you're reading my mind right now but I respect your background. You have seen someone very close to you go through the process of fighting cancer, and share what you experienced so the audience will have that understand their passion just like I see it.
Right. Well, I'd be dishonest if I said that this was all driven by my mother. My mother is I think, a typical case, an inveterate New Yorker. She wanted to smoke right through her therapy.
Oh, no.
So my mother is, she used to laugh about it too. But the world is definitely made up. I think things are different, especially young people today. They eat well. They take care of themselves. They like to measure the effectiveness of their lifestyle. And there are a lot of technologies that are around that allow them to do this. And that was not the case 20, 30, 40 years ago. Cancer was something that happened to you, and oh my gosh, it's the C word. It's a curse. I'm going to die. The psychological impact on certain patients is a subject really of a whole different show. I know many people today that meditate the thoughts away and maintain their health that way. But the reason, from just a pure technology point of view, to get this disease detected early, there are a lot of different treatments that are not necessarily so devastating as the treatments that we have today. I'm talking about chemo and all the stuff that people know about current treatments. There are a lot of immunotherapies that are coming up. There's an impact on nutrition. There are lifestyle changes people can make. And, some doctors ask me, well, what do you want to do? You want people should live till they're, 200? And I say, yes. But that, of course, is the opinion of a technology person, not just a medical person.
Well, that brings up a good point. And I write about this in my upcoming book, Answers Unleashed. I recognize that the brain has a strong impact on the immunity system that we have in our body. Specifically, what I notice is that the brain naturally sends out messages to the immune system to remove toxins from the body. And this is my LaPointe theory that I'm sharing here. However, that when the immune system is taxed or becomes compromised, it becomes unable to send the body messages to remove the cancer cells that all of our body naturally has, and every single one of us has cancer cells, and it is because our immune system is strong that it removes the cancer cells so we don't have to deal with it. But when the brain fails to isolate and remove these cells, that's when there's an issue, and that's where it attaches. It then just feeds off the fear and the trauma that we have experienced before in our life. And this is my LaPointe theory again. And unless there's an opportunity for the brain to body connection to be restored and for the brain to regain its reprogramming ability, we're going to be in these situations. And so I really enjoy that there are the brain to body reprogramming opportunities that are existing, not only through this process of medicine, but it's also being restored in all the different natural areas as well. And so it's the point of catching it early. For the medical side, it's a part of catching it early. And so your company, it looks at two different things. It looks at the cells itself.
Yeah, we do. We look at the cells, and we also look at the state of the immune system.
Now, that's fascinating.
They are related. And, what you just explained about the brain, it's very true. It's not, I would say, articulated in the field consistently, but it is definitely, people know, the doctors know that patients that are stressed do poorly, or let's say have less favorable outcomes. They don't know, for example, in breast cancer what the triggering mechanism is, but they know that all breast cancers start in the breast duct. Now, why do some people develop the disease and some don't? Well, the ones that do develop it often have some sort of stressful event. I mean, it could even be a traffic accident. It could be something else. So there's this obviously brain-body connection. I think it's an area of study that merits a lot more attention. So yes on that. I also see people that are fighters, and I see people that are resigned and they don't fight. And obviously, you can imagine what the outcomes are. I also see physicians that are looking for a cure, and I see others that are, more on palliative care. So, and they make their patients very comfortable, and so it's an area of intense evolution. I do think that the brain is the ultimate power here. I think there are people that would tell you that how they train themselves to do better. So yes, I'm a believer in all that. Not scientifically, but it doesn't matter. I've seen the outcomes.
We're waiting for it. I'm waiting for the LaPointe Nobel Peace Prize here.
Yeah, I mean it is. I mean, if you patients will explain this to you. And the issue of the immune system. So there is very definitely a link between. Cancer cells really at a very simplified level are just cells that don't die. So every cell is born, through division and then dies at a certain point in time. It's happening right now to you and I as we're sitting here. Now, there could be some bad actors that just don't die. So they continue to grow and proliferate, and that eventually becomes a tumor mass. So the body fights it. So the same way white blood cells fight any invader, and that can be measured. So we offer a test like that. There's a Korean company that we partnered with called ATGen that uses it extensively in Korea and other markets. In Canada, it's approved by the Canadian FDA, usually in colorectal cancers, because there's a link between colorectal cancer and a depressed immune system. So you measure that depression, and then you know to pay attention to that patient and go do other tests to find out what's going on. And I think in the years to come, what you talked about with the brain and the ability to influence the body will be scientifically documented and understood. Today, I look at that as even placebo. It's amazing on how many studies the control group on placebo does as well or has a superior response to the people taking the experimental drugs. It's just amazing. So why is that?
Me personally, Olympia LaPointe, I really believe that the brain itself is capable of doing far more than we scientifically understand. And it's estimated that we only understand 10% of its function right now, but there's 90% of its function we don't know. And I'm so fascinated because the brain actually is its own kind of like chemical lab. It creates, from all the different compounds that we have existing in our body and in the environment, different chemical combinations to naturally fight things in us, but it's only if we know what we're looking for. And your company also looks at the immune system as a whole, and there's different indicators within that.
We do, yes. And we do tend to we do tend to give the ordering physician a lot of data about that specific person, because that's the other point. You and I are the same, but we're very different. So, I'm 240 pounds, overweight, et cetera. My result would be very different than yours. So it's important that these tests be customizable, if that's even possible to explain it that
and
way.
let's go into
it's not
that
one
a little
size
bit more.
fits all.
One size fits all, and it's so fascinating. And while we have a little bit of time, we're going to go into that. Like, for example, most of the data that has been captured so far has been of one type of genetic structure. And let's say for myself, who's a Native American woman of color with background, with both European background and indigenous background, it's not necessarily characterized in the medical field as much. And how do you go about doing that with the reports that are generated from these particular medical diagnostics?
Right. Well, the simple answer to that is that much larger studies have to be done, and not just studying an Indo-European extraction at some hospital in Heidelberg. They have thousands of people need to be studied, and that's just starting. For our part, we're a small company, 50 people. We have a joint venture in China. So here maybe we can run clinical studies. We have one now in breast cancer with 210 people, which is considered a large study in the United States. We'll do it in China on 5,000 or 10,000 people. And of course, that's Chinese extraction. It's not Indo-European, but that's also going to fill in some of these gaps. The only answer I would have is that this has to be done on a broad basis, and then the institutions have to share the information, because what they do know often is held within their own institution for competitive reasons or funding reasons, and that has to be shared broadly.
So there's an opportunity that exists within the medical research community to be able to share documentation on these studies that will in turn be able to give a broader spectrum of the DNA makeup of people across the world.
Yes, there is. And that's happening in two areas. So the NIH, big push this year. They've talked about the Cancer Moonshot 2020 and all that. So, advertising aside, the NIH is recommending that everybody who is developing data with money that's funded through the government share this in a global database. So that'll eventually happen. I think it's a great idea. Then there are companies like 23andMe up in the Bay Area and others that are doing broad-based genetic tests for a few $100s. And that data can also be accessed. And they have a pretty broad mixture of people. I don't know exactly how many people they've tested, but probably millions at this point. So we have buckets that we can tap into for this.
Well, Andre, this has been so fascinating to have you on our show. Just what one key piece of advice would you give doctors, and one key piece of advice would you give patients, and one key piece of advice would you give those around, those supporting the individuals going through this? What would you say?
Oh my gosh, those are three simple questions, right? So for doctors, I would say the time is now. There's a tremendous amount of data, and 10 years ago when we started, there was not that data. So I would encourage the doctors to sit down and look at the data. For patients, I think there are better outcomes just around the corner. And for the families, this may be more important. I don't think it has to be the devastating experience it sometimes is. I don't think it has to bankrupt families. I think having a critical disease like this can be managed early, like diabetes, like anything else. The technology is there for it. And I think what has to be done is really human practices. So all of that's available today. So it's a positive message.
Andre, thank you for being on our show. How do people contact you or contact your company?
Thank you for having me. Well, I'm at Synvenio. We have a website. And if you don't remember Synvenio, which is a difficult word, there's liquidbiopsy.com. I'm on that website as well. I'm happy to answer anything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olympia.
Well, you've heard it. You now know the medical practices that are cutting edge, that the computers are using to be able to analyze many different DNA strains as well as the immune system. So I am so happy that you heard the information here first. It's in the news right now, and we are bringing it to you live. Now, for more information like this, you can always find us at AnswersUnleashed.com. You can call in 888-88-ANSWERS to ask us more questions about what's going on. We thank you for tuning in to KPCRradio.com and listening to us live every single week. And once again, I am Olympia LaPointe, here with you, giving you great information on how to reshape your brain with science and faith on Answers Unleashed. See you next time.